My name is Yisreal Campbell, and I'm an alcoholic. I apologize for the glary light behind me, but I was going for the front light, kind of line up Rembrandt look, but it's 5:30 in the morning here, and it was just not enough light to sustain consciousness for an entire hour. So the only thing worse than a boring speaker is a sleep speaker. So I will do my best to keep us. Wait, I'm not charging. I'm supposed to be charging. So I want to thank Carl for inviting me to be here. Thank all of you for being here. Thanks to my friends and sponsees from around the world who have joined us. It is an honor and a privilege to participate in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. This Zoom thing is absolutely amazing in my eyes, that I can be sitting in Jerusalem, Israel, and be speaking to people all over the world is phenomenal. Certainly something is different than our regular meetings. I was going to say lost. I'm not sure lost is the right word. It's certainly different than our regular meetings, but I think we've certainly gained something that we wouldn't have had. I certainly have, and I'm thankful for that. I say that it's an honor and a privilege to participate in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean that. If you're new here tonight, I want to welcome you. Alcoholics Anonymous is at the same time the single greatest thing that has ever happened to me. And as my friend Scott Redmond used to say, Alcoholics Anonymous, how lame is that? You ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and there's that quality to it too, right? I mean, you're I was scrolling through the little pictures at the top, and I came upon the various. The people that I don't know, I certainly don't know, but the people, I see several sober houses, I believe, are joining us tonight, which is wonderful, and I can only imagine it's not the most. It may be somewhat socially awkward to be sitting in a room full of folding chairs, staring at a computer screen, to a little elf-like guy from Jerusalem. So, it might have that Alcoholics Anonymous, how lame is this quality, but I would ask you to just kind of take a breath and be in the moment and be open to the idea that this is one of the most miraculous moments of your life, not because I'm speaking and not because you're sitting in a folding chair in a room full of women, staring at a guy that looks like me talking, just because you're on the cusp of freedom. You're really, really, really been offered this opportunity to live a life of freedom. I know that because you're here, and I know that's what Alcoholics Anonymous offers. I say it's an honor to participate in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous because everything in my life is built on the fact that I'm in AA, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And there's tons of good, and there's often some bad, and some days I just walk through, but that is all allowed by my membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I say it's a privilege really to echo Dr. Silkworth in The Doctor's Opinion, when Bill Wilson, he writes, came to him. Dr. Silkworth writes, later he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients. And then the best part is this: herein with some misgiving, we consented. In other words, they thought it was a bad idea, but they figured how much damage can they do to each other? You know what I mean? So, excuse me, I'm sitting on my coat. They figured how much damage can they do to each other. And because they were willing to take that chance way back there in December of 34, January of 35, March, April, February, I don't know exactly where it was. I think it was before. I actually don't know, but I think it was before he met Dr. Bob. I certainly know that Bill spent many months unsuccessfully, I say, but that is that really true? unsuccessfully talking to other alcoholics, but successfully talking to other alcoholics because he stayed sober. So that he was sober in May of 1935 when he went to visit Akron, Ohio. And, most of us know the story. Maybe not all of us do. When Alcoholics Anonymous was founded. Of course, it could have been founded, I guess, in December of 1934 when our first member got sober. It could have been founded in 1933 when Dr. Carl Jung spoke with Roland Hazard, who spoke with Ebby T., who spoke with Bill Wilson. It's not a solid moment. I think it's not by accident, or it's not lacking interest that we choose to count the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous as the day when not when member number 1 got sober, but when member number 2 got sober. I think that's really speaks volumes about what we mean by this thing and what we mean to do here. That's the sunlight of Jerusalem rising over there. Right there. Anyway, it's morning here, and I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be with you. I told you my name is Yisreal Campbell. That's important to know. I put my name and number in the chat. That's important. If you put yours in the chat, I'll take your number and I'll call you, because that's what this is all about. Furthering connection, continuing connection, growing connection, getting out of self. I have a sobriety date. It is the 14th of February, 1980. I have a home group. It's the Mediterranean group. We meet here in its largest body of water. It's modeled after the Pacific group and the Atlantic group and the Mediterranean group. I promise you, for good or for bad, it's nothing like the Mediterranean. It's nothing like the Atlantic group or the Pacific group. I just don't have that kind of will. I have a sponsor. His name is Clancy I, and that's really the important information to know about me for many reasons. Some of which I'll get into, and some of which, of course, I'll forget to get into because it's 5:45 in the morning. I'm alcoholic. I stake my alcoholism to that line in the 3rd chapter, More About Alcoholism, where it says. The chapter, of course, starts off by saying most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he's bodily and mentally different from his fellows. That has been true. I've learned that is true. But what I first caught onto and held onto was the next sentence, or one sentence later, when it says the idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous at 16 years old. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in the middle of my junior year in high school. Certainly there's a ton of stuff that you guys have done that I have never done. There's just, if you had to do a certain number of things to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't know if I would have qualified. I qualified by reading those 20 questions. I qualified by having a friend who had come here who had seen the change in her eyes, and when on that fateful morning when I needed to change the way I was living my life, I called Alcoholics Anonymous. And excuse me, I drank for 7 years, start to finish. I picked up my first drink when I was 9 years old. I won't talk a lot about my drinking, but I want to qualify. I want to say a few things about my drinking. I want to say that the first drink I ever took, not knowing why I was taking it, my cousin was a liar, a cheat, and a thief. He would want me to tell you he didn't rob people. He robbed people that robbed people. These other guys would rob houses, and then my cousin and his friends would steal the stolen stuff. And one night they stole a case of whiskey and a couple cases of Carling Black Label beer. They told me I could be the bartender. I could open up everybody's beer, take the first sip. I realized if you're only allowed one sip, take a big sip, right? I'm alcoholic. I'm not stupid. And I experienced the freedom that I had never experienced before in my life. I don't know if self-obsession, fear, anxiety can be transmitted through breast milk, but I'm not a doctor, but I'm willing to bet that it can be, and that it was in my case. I'm not blaming my mother. My mother was a human being in the late 1950s and early 1960s, who's a human being who experienced great, I believe, great spiritual desires and needs. Hence, she joined the convent after college. I realize that might somehow complicate the story in your mind. I'll say it soon. I just want to stay on this for a minute. I'm not blaming my mother at all. Thank God, at the end of my mother's life, we were clean. We were there. We were 100% good, and that was great. I do want to say that every thought I ever thought before I picked up my first drink was one of fear and anxiety and self-obsession, to my way of thinking. That's the way it seemed to me. It seemed to me that everybody was always different. Everybody was always special. Everybody always had something I didn't have. And I had radar for that for 100 miles. And I picked up that drink, and it just poof, it went away. I just didn't care anymore. I have a memory of walking up to a grown man who was walking his dog, putting my arm around his shoulder, looking him in the eye and saying, "Get bent." Now, I don't know if that happened. I'm 5 feet 9 inches tall now. When I was 9, I was a lot shorter. I'm not sure I could have walked up to a grown man, but that is certainly the feeling that alcohol gave me. Alcohol was the solution, though I didn't know what the problem was. Alcohol was the answer, though I didn't know what the question was. That's the way I took alcohol into my body on the first time, and that's what I sought to do with alcohol every other time I ever drank it. I took a drink at 9 and felt like I had waited, like I had missed out, like I couldn't believe that I had gone through kindergarten without this substance. You know what I mean? Like, I felt cheated. At 9 years old, when I picked up my first drink, I felt cheated that and I came to Alcoholics Anonymous 7 years later, and I didn't know I was going to end up safe, sane, and sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. If I had, I would have done more. But every drink I ever took was to alleviate fear, and every drink I ever took created more fear because it created a lack of control. And though I both craved that lack of control, it also scared me, and it also created the need for another drink, and it was a vicious cycle. And that's what it was. As you can tell, probably, I sit before you an Orthodox Jew. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, an Irish, Italian, Catholic kid from Philadelphia. I'm not saying that if you work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in your life, you'll end up an Orthodox Jew living in Jerusalem, but it has happened. I know we fear a lot of things. We fear a lot of things when we turn the thought of turning our will and life over to the care of God. Wow, that creates great fear. It did in me. I know it does in many people I sponsor. Like, what is God going to do? The classic story for me is of an old sponsor named Clint Hodges, passed away many years ago. If you ever get a chance to hear one of his talks, give a listen. Clint was a solid member of Alcoholics Anonymous, as was Scott Redmond. If you can hear his talks, listen to those talks too. And Clint went to his sponsor, who was Clancy, and said, Clint had grown up a fundamental Christian in Montana. He hated God. He hated any mention of God. And he went to his sponsor and he said, "Clancy, I'm afraid that if I turn my will and life over to the care of God, God is going to make me a missionary in China." And Clancy looked at him and said, "Clint, do you believe in God?" And Clint said, "No, absolutely not. I hate God." Clancy shook his head and said, "Do you speak Chinese?" Clint said, "No." And Clancy said, "Why would God make you a missionary in China?" And that seems to make so much sense when it's put to you that way, right? And that's really what sponsors are for. Sponsors are to filter out all the craziness and all the insanity that we kind of bring to the table, right? I can understand from Clint's perspective. that it makes sense that God, being God, seems like a very godly thing to do, to take a nice, young, sober alcoholic and make them a missionary in China when they hate God and can't speak Chinese. Seems like a good punishment, not for the Chinese, but for Clint. But it also makes perfect sense when kind of laid out by the sponsor, by good orderly direction, that why would God want to do that? What would it serve? Who would it serve? And that's the beginning of the journey, really, realizing that when I talk about powerlessness and in step one and unmanageability and bringing a power into my life, it's not a power of punishment. It's not a power of degradation and humiliation. That's not what God is here to do for me when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous. God is here to power the life that I want to build. I want to say there's a great quote I've heard it attributed to two different rabbis. One was a Hasidic rabbi from the Ukraine, from a little town of Berdichev, which I'm sure means absolutely nothing to almost all of you, but I just like saying it for one reason, because I've been to that town. I've been to that grave of Levi Yitzhak, the rabbi of Berdichev. And he said, while speaking to an atheist in that town, he said, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. And that for me is a statement that should be on the walls of Alcoholics Anonymous, next to the easy does it and the think and the first things first sign, and in the green Gothic lettering of the clubhouse of my first day, where it said, but for the grace of God. And I looked around that room and I thought, but for the grace of God, what? I would have gotten hit by a bus on my way in here. Like, it did not seem like a but for the grace of God moment. But I think that should be there too. The God that what I want to say, if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous today, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. That's not the God I'm talking about. If you look at me and you see, graying old Jewish man from Jerusalem talking about God, I think I'm gonna fucking puke. That's not the God I'm talking about. I'm talking about a God that manifests in people, and that you are the people that God manifests in. I'm talking about a God that is here to enable us to live a life where we are not destroying ourselves and each other. I saw that Lexi's here, and I know that Lexi's sponsor, Sharon Crane, says that when an alcoholic goes to sleep sober, 10 people sleep better. And my first thought when I heard Sharon say that was at least 10 people sleep better. But let's remember the inverse. When an alcoholic goes to sleep drunk, a whole lot of other people are in pain that night. A whole lot of other lives are being destroyed that night. I'm not saying get sober for those 10 people. I don't think that'll be possible, because this is not a simple process. It's not it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it's daily work, and it's constant work. And, but I want to just say for a moment how incredibly blessed we are to be here. It doesn't seem like that. There's 161 people. Earlier today, I heard a great talk by a guy named Joe C. at Sunday afternoon, Ohio Street. I mean, how insane is that? I'm sitting in Jerusalem. I've been to 2 meetings today in Southern California, but only because Southern California is the Mecca of Alcoholics Anonymous. But that's a different story for a different day, Sitting here with 161 people, I was sitting there with over 200 people, and that's what I'm talking about. What I realized very early on, and I don't know if I actually realized it or if I only realized it in retrospect, but what I learned very early on is that in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have to find a power greater than ourselves to affect our sobriety, to begin our sobriety, to engage with our sobriety, to power our sobriety, right? We are people who are powerless over alcohol. We are people who could not drink for one single day. Many of us tried many other things in order to not drink, and we'd be like, look, I didn't drink. I passed out on barbiturates, but I didn't drink. You know what I mean? I developed an opiate habit, but I didn't drink. Congratulations. You're killing yourself in a different way. You know what I mean? How do we go from someone who can't drink for a single day to someone who suddenly can go an entire day? Simply maybe because someone just suggested, hey, man, can you not drink tonight? And can you call me tomorrow and we'll go to another meeting? And poof, suddenly we don't drink. The grace of God, many will call it something. But very soon I learned that this power greater than myself, by which that I needed to bring into my life on any given day, at its most basic level, at its most simple construction, it is me and any one of you. Me and any one of you is a power greater than me. And that's what I need, a power greater than myself. Now, I've been sober 40 years. Like, that wasn't enough to fascinate me, to engage me, to draw me in, to interest me, to power me for 40 years. Sometimes I need God at times of the day. I need access to a power greater than myself at times of the day when none of you are around. I mean, it's certainly changing with all this kind of around the world stuff, but that's not what I mean. Sometimes I need something greater than a more not a specific human being, and thank God I've accessed that through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And for me, it's manifested in the expression of Orthodox Judaism. But I'm not saying that you should be an Orthodox Jew. I'm not saying that you should move to Jerusalem, and I'm not saying that you should have my life. What I'm saying is that what is offered here is your life. And if you take anything from my story, take the message that your life is available to you through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm always this Zoom thing. When I talk, and when I've talked for all these 40 years, I often mention that I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 16. I was the youngest person in the room. But there was these two young women running around who were 5 years sober, and they were 16 years. They had been 16 when they got sober. So everyone used to invite me and introduce me to Nancy, and I forget the other woman's name. But Nancy, I always remembered, and I always remembered Nancy's name. And Nancy was 21. She got sober when she was 16, and everyone wanted me to know that. And quite honestly, at 16, 21 seemed like 50. I was not so impressed that someone who was 21 could be sober. It was like, whatever. She could drink legally. She could drive. I wasn't impressed. But I always remembered Nancy. And at the beginning of this Zoom, I'm telling my story at one of these talks somewhere in the world. And I say that, Nancy, and I mentioned the 319 Club in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, where I got sober. And I see in the chat, I'm Nancy. And after I got done talking, I started chatting with Nancy, and she had in fact gotten sober at 17, which I didn't remember it that way, but and she had stayed sober 33 years, so she hadn't stayed active in Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is not an indictment in any way of Nancy. I'm simply reporting what she told me and has told me since. She stayed sober for 33 years, but she didn't stay active in Alcoholics Anonymous. And at 33 years sober, she lost her mother, her father, and her husband in 1 year. They all died. And she was struggling. And she went to her therapist and said, maybe I'm not alcoholic. I was 17 years old when I got sober, and I'm 50 years old now. Maybe I didn't, And her therapist said, maybe you're not. She picked up a drink because she thought, maybe I can drink safely. She realized almost immediately that she could not drink safely, and she realized almost immediately after that she could not get sober again. And she drank for 9.5 years. And she just celebrated. She just wrote me tonight when I invited her to this meeting that she's celebrating 9 months today. And she said, again, it's not, if you don't want to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, by all means, don't be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I hope for you sobriety, however you find it. I really am not one of those people that says that we're not the only way to get sober and then says, but we're really the only way to get sober. I don't think we're the only way to get sober. I just think we're the best way to get sober. That's what I think. And I'll tell you why. But anyway, Nancy's celebrating 9 months today. And she said to me on more than one occasion, it's a lot harder to do this the second time. I recently heard a guy speak. He came to visit us here in Jerusalem with over 50 years, and he listed all the things he does to stay sober. He attends several meetings a week. He has a sponsor. He is a sponsor. He has a home group. He has a commitment at that home group. He reads the literature on a regular basis. He prays and he meditates. He makes amends when necessary. He asks God to remove defects of character when necessary. And he sat there and he stopped for a moment and I think he's shocked some of our new people at the tremendous amount of stuff that he does at over 50 years sober. And then he said, look, quite honestly, I don't really think I need to do all of this stuff to stay sober. He said, I'm just not sure what I don't need to do. It's just such a blessing, and it's such a gift, and it's such a miracle that we're here and we're sober, because the vast majority of alcoholics tonight are dying of alcoholism. The vast majority of alcoholics in the world today, this morning, are dying of alcoholism. And probably the vast majority of them have never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to tell a story really quickly. The story of Noah, the guy with the boat. Not because it's a religious story, but because it's a really old story. It's somewhere between 3,500 and 5,000 years old. And most of us know it, but I'll refresh us with the details quickly. Noah was out one day doing his thing, doing his Noah thing, getting his Noah on. And God said, build a boat and save the world. Okay, Noah said. And he did it, right? Sounds kind of crazy. Neighbors probably thought he was nuts building a boat. What, Noah, what are you doing building a boat? Why are you building a boat? God told me to build a boat. Really? God told you to build? Yeah, God told me to build a boat and save the world. I'm sure they were not as smug when the rain started and they weren't on the boat. But anyway, Noah built a boat and he saved the world. And you know what he did when he got back from saving the world? He planted a vineyard and he got drunk and naked in front of the kids. That's what the text says. That's what the Bible says. That's what would be called the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament to Christians says, that God got back, that Noah got back from saving the entire world, and the very first thing he did was planted a vineyard and got drunk and naked in front of the kids. Sounds like alcoholism to me, doesn't it? Right? So from that day to this, somewhere between 3,500 and 5,000 years ago, there has not been an answer for the problem that we have. People like us died horrible, humiliating, shameful deaths after getting drunk and naked in front of the kids. That's what we did. And there was no other option until 85 years ago. What is 85 out of 5,000? A tiny little window. And even still in these 85 years, the vast majority of people with alcoholism will die of it. And here we are sitting here tonight, safe, sane, and sober. Whether we're in our homes or whether we're in the Puente house or wherever we are, whether we're on a folding, I'm saying that's who I'm faced. I'm looking at that dog wagging its tail in my face. That's the kind of respect I get after 40 years of sobriety. I got the ass end of a golden retriever. That's the gifts, man. That's the gifts. Anyway, here we are. We are here, and I just want to say, hold on to this. And the way to hold on to this is to give it away. Give it away to somebody else. Get it, do it, Work the steps, get a sponsor, get a home group, get a commitment. I know it sounds stupid. Stupid. It just sounds ridiculous. How the hell can these 12 simple steps, how can talking to that stupid lady that's my sponsor, how can making coffee for a bunch of idiots, how can this help? But it just opens up the world, and we get to have the life that we get to have. I was going to say the life we want, but I didn't even want this life. I didn't even know that the life I have was an option when I got here. It says beyond your wildest dreams, right? When I got here and they said you will have a life beyond your wildest dreams, I thought what they meant was my wildest dreams. And I said to myself at 16 years old in 1980, what I want more than anything else is a lifetime supply of Marlboro and a Camaro, a brand new Camaro. And if you had given me, if Alcoholics Anonymous had given me the life that I desire, my wildest dreams, I would be stuck with a lifetime supply of cigarettes I don't smoke and a 40-year-old car. That was as big as it got in my little mind. I couldn't even see the life I have today. I couldn't see that I would move to another country, become a citizen of that country, change my name, change my religion. I couldn't see any of that. I couldn't even see the life that Alcoholics Anonymous has offered me. And it wasn't in one of the pamphlets. It wasn't like one day I was leafing through the, a member's eye view is AA for you, the group pamphlet. And suddenly I came upon the pamphlet, Yisreal Chris Campbell, this is your life. And I opened it up and I thought, yeah, I'll take that. Sure. No, it just slowly unfolded one day at a time, one step at a time, through this daily reprieve that we talk about in step 10. The book talks about a daily reprieve. The book says, right? I just want to read it because I got it wrong for about 35 years, right? The book says, I used to have it memorized, and then I realized it's all written down. There's no need to memorize it. It says, it is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism, and that's always the answer. When we get into people, you'll hear people get into, I'm recovering, I'm recovered. Some say they're recovered. Some say they're recovering. It doesn't, to my mind, it doesn't really matter if I'm recovering or I'm recovered, because I'm only recovering or recovered, as the book says, from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, which means I wasn't even hopeless. I just thought I was hopeless, which is important to know, because I know sometimes when we sit there, when I sat there early on, I felt hopeless. I felt like this would never work for me. Certainly not to the degree that it did for you. How many times was I to sit in meetings and listen to people share, and it seemed like just miraculous stuff happened. You hear a speaker and they're like, well, I couldn't read, and now I invented my own language. They're like, what? How did you do that? You know what I mean? They're like, I'd never gone to school. I dropped out of the first grade. Now I own a university that I created, and it's named after me, and everyone studies me. You know what? Well, I'm like trying to get up for work. How do you get up for work? How do you call that sponsor? How do you reach out to a newcomer? How do you give out your phone number? That's what I want to know. Because that was important, because I'll tell you, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I believe, because on the first day that I came to AA, about 50 people gave me their phone numbers. And most of them wrote call anytime, and they underlined it. They put an exclamation point. They shook my hand. They gave me the card. They said, looked me dead in the eye, and they said, call anytime. And I do that. I give out my card. I write call anytime. I shake their hand. I say call anytime. You know why I do that? Because I know they're never going to call. Right? If they call, they're going to call when they think I'm not there. I mean, this was back in the day. And there's nothing I hate more than AA speakers that are like, when I got sober, we didn't have hospitals and detoxes. We threw a guy in a closet for a week, took him to a meeting. You'll hear these old timers. They're always like, when I got sober, we didn't have this, we didn't have that. You'll hear them say things like, well, we didn't have coffee cups. No, we threw grounds in our mouth and we drank hot water. That's what we did. We didn't sip out of a cup. But I'll say this, when I got sober, the phone was attached to the house. If you wanted to, you could take your phone with you. You had to take the whole house too, right? A mobile phone in my day was a really long cord that you could stretch into the laundry room when your girlfriend called. That was a mobile phone. Anyway, I would call these guys if I ever called them, which I never would have, when I thought they weren't going to be there. One guy took my number and he called me, and the next day he invited me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said yes, and I went. But what I wanted to say was, Paul, I went to AA yesterday. What do you mean I have to go 2 days in a row? But it was at that meeting where I caught alcoholism. And what I mean by that is I listened to you guys talk about what was wrong with you, and you described you described yourselves as alcoholic, and then you described your emotional, your psychological, and your spiritual states. You didn't state that's what you were doing, but that's what you were doing. And I made the connection. If you're alcoholic and that's how you feel, then I'm alcoholic because I feel the same way. That's the difference here, right? That's what we learn. Scott Redmond of blessed memory used to say that alcoholism is contagious. We catch it through our ears. And I think that's what he meant. We get this disease by listening to someone else tell us about their disease. That was what happened for Bill and Bob, right? Bob's driving out to Henrietta Sieberling's guest house, right? And I heard this story from his son who was sitting in the backseat of the car that day. And Bob looked at his wife, Ann, and he said, we'll give this bird 15 minutes. Now, why did Bob say that? I don't know. But what I think Bob meant was I've had enough people talk to me about my alcoholism. I've had enough people tell me that I'm disgraceful, that I'm shameful, that I shouldn't act this way. I've had enough people tell me that I should get my act together. I should, I'm a respected doctor, or I was a respected doctor, and I should stop acting this way. The last thing Bob Smith wanted on Mother's Day, May 1935, was to be reprimanded by some salesman from New York. Nobody from Ohio likes to be spoken down to by someone from New York. I don't think people from Ohio like to speak to people from New York. But Bob agreed because he had acted horribly the day before and passed out at the table when delivering his Mother's Day gift. And so he decided to go. Right? And he said, I'll give this bird 15 minutes. But Bill didn't want to talk to Bob about Bob. Bill wanted to talk to Bob about Bill. Bill sat down and told Bob Bill's story. Bill said, Bob, I need you. And that is just as true today. I'm telling my story, hopefully, to an alcoholic who's new or suffering, and I'm hopefully giving them an idea of acceptance of their alcoholism, an idea of a program of recovery, the inspiration to go the next step, the inspiration to turn to the man or woman next to them and say, I need help. That's my intention. Sure, there's ego involved. Sure, I see the AA superstars here in the meeting. I'm not going to name them because they know who they are. I see that they're here. I'm impressed that I'm the speaker and they're listening. But my intention when I awoke at 4:30 this morning, my intention when I awoke at 4 and 4:05 and 4:15 and 4:20 and 4:30 when I finally dragged myself out of bed before lying down again to think, you know what, I don't really need to be that early to that meeting. My intention then and in my heart now is to give, not to get. That is the secret of Alcoholics Anonymous. You are here to give this away to someone else. So if you have 3 days, look for someone with 2 days. If you work 3 steps, look for someone that's worked 2 steps. Give this away. That is the secret, I believe, to long-term survival here. People will describe AA as spiritual kindergarten. People will describe AA as the starting place, and it is, and it was that for me. It is also the truly most miraculous place I have ever been. I didn't even get to what I was starting to read. That's why, it's 6:18 in the morning. So really quickly, after I stopped there and went on a rant about cured, right? Recovered, recovering, who cares? I'm not cured. That's what I need to remember. I'm not cured of alcoholism. But the next line What we really have here is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. I would have told you for over 30 years that what that line said was what we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on our spiritual condition. But it doesn't say contingent on our spiritual condition. It says contingent on the maintenance. I'm not responsible. Some days I'm not in fit spiritual condition, but I cannot drink on that day because I'm still involved in the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And that means reaching out to another alcoholic. That means having a commitment at my group that day. That means prayer and meditation, making the phone call to see how you're doing because I know you weren't at the meeting last night, calling my sponsor, calling my sponsees, answering the phone when my sponsees call. That's the maintenance. That's what I'm responsible for. Ultimately, whether I'm in fit spiritual condition is not my job to decide that. I do the maintenance, right? I walk into the kitchen and I say, God, it's a mess in here. I wish it were clean. That's not going to clean the kitchen, right? I got to do the dishes. I got to wipe the counters. I got to sweep the floor. Then I have a clean kitchen. I'm responsible for the maintenance. I know I'm quickly running out of time. So I want to touch on one other thing. There's a beautiful article in The Language of the Heart, which is a book that is a collection of Bill Wilson's grapevine writings. And in 1957, Bill wrote an article called The Greatest Gift of All, and I just want to read a little bit of it to you. The greatest gift that can come to anybody is a spiritual awakening. Without doubt, this would be the certain verdict of every well-recovered alcoholic in AA's entire fellowship. So then what is this spiritual awakening, this transforming experience? Those are Dr. Young's words. Dr. Silkworth spoke about a spiritual awakening and entire psychic change. Dr. Young talked about a transforming experience. How can we receive it and what does it do? To begin with, he writes, a spiritual awakening is our means of finding sobriety. And for us of AA, sobriety means life itself. We know that a spiritual experience is the key to survival from alcoholism, and that for most of us, it is the only key. We must awake or we die. Again, no, that's not a threat. So we do awake, Bill writes, and we are sober. Then what? Is sobriety all that we are to expect of a spiritual awakening? Again, the voice of AA speaks up. No. You'll hear that in meetings, right? You'll hear people say, we didn't promise you anything but sobriety. That seems to not be true. Again, the voice of AA speaks up, no. And then Bill continues, the sobriety is only a bare beginning. It is only the first gift of the first awakening. If more gifts are to be received, our awakening has to go on. And if it does go on, we find that bit by bit, we can discard the old life, the one that does not work, for a new life that can and does work under any conditions whatever. Regardless of worldly success or failure, regardless of pain or joy, regardless of sickness or health, or even of death itself, a new life of endless possibilities can be lived if we are willing to continue our awakening. I love that idea. I love that sobriety is only a bare beginning. That's what I've been trying to say for an hour. It is only the first gift of the first awakening. The gifts continue, the awakenings continue. If we stay engaged, if we stay in the process, if we stay in the game. And so my hope and my blessing for each and every one of us. I love that the dog still sleeps with his head away from me, but my wish, my blessing for all of us is that we stay here. We stay here and tell our stories like Bill did for Bob. Bill told Bob Bill's story, and Bob heard Bob's story, and Bob began a life of sobriety, and we suddenly had a founding date for a program. It's not by accident that we founded this program on the day that AA number 2 got sober, not on the AA day number 1. This is not a self-help program. It's a help other people program. And I'm honored and privileged to be a part of it. And thank you. Thank all of you. And thanks to the Covina Group. Good night.